Good morning, everyone. Today is Tuesday, May 25th, and today we are going to be working on lesson 7.1, Identity and the Self. So to begin class today, we are going to start off by answering some questions. And so I really want you to think about these questions as you are answering them. So think, what do you think people think when they first see you? So when people first see you, what do you think they're thinking? And then, what are some things like hobbies, traits, or characteristics that people might not know about you, especially if they only go off of how you look or their first interaction with you? And then, do you ever feel like you have to pretend to be someone else or behave a certain way? And why or why not? And similar to that, do you ever change your behavior based on who you are with? Why or why not? So I really want you to think about these things, especially, and it might be useful to have out your identity map and really be thinking about how these things kind of do you change your behavior? Do you sometimes feel like you have to pretend to be someone else in order to fit in? And now we're going to read an article called When I Applied to College, I Didn't Want to Sell My Pain. And so as we are going through and reading this, we want you to number the paragraphs, underline important information, so really be thinking about the writer, the events, and their thinking, circle keywords, and put a question mark next to parts of confusion. So it says, when I applied to college, I didn't want to sell my pain. Yes, I'm a student from the hood, but we have more to offer than our adversity. Dominic Kesterton, New York Times. As I kept rewriting my personal statement, writes Elijah Magnuson about his college application process, it kept sounding cliched. It was my authentic experience, but I felt the trauma overwhelmed my drafts. In school, most kids are told that they have potential to do great things in life. They're told that the sky is the limit. As I started to be recognized as a promising student, around 8th grade, I was told, you're smart and you're from the hood. You're from the projects. Colleges will love you. When I heard this, I was confused. I always looked at being from the hood as a bad thing. It was something I was quite ashamed of when I was younger. So for my teachers and advisors to make it seem like it was a cool thing made me feel good inside, until I fully realized what they were talking about. In my life, I've had a lot of unfortunate experiences, so when it came time for me to write my personal statement for college applications, I knew that I could sell a story about all the struggles I had overcome. Each draft I wrote had a different topic. The first was about growing up without a dad being involved. The second was about the many times my life was violently threatened. The third was about coping with anxiety and PTSD. And the rest followed the same theme. Every time I wrote, I discarded, then redrafted. I didn't feel good. It felt as if I were trying to gain pity. I knew what I went through was tough, and to overcome those challenges were remarkable. Was that all I had to offer? Conflicted, I asked to see what others had written. I spoke to my old middle school algebra teacher, Nathaniel Snickler. When he was applying to Morehouse, he remembered, he felt pressure to write about something I could oversell. He knew enough to write about hardships he faced, he said, but although I didn't have enough, I didn't go without. This made him feel that he was at a disadvantage because he was competing with kids on the same academic level who had faced even more adversity. So the question on his mind for a long time was, how can I oversell myself? He explained that this was an experience not talked about enough. Students of color trying to become poster children for trauma and pain. The focus becomes no longer on who you are as a person, but rather, are my challenges enough, as Mr. Snickler said, and will this give me value? Mr. Snickler asked me, who are you? He urged me to question what actually makes up my identity, because while struggles are important, they're not my only contribution. He felt that the students of color glorifying their hardships are selling trauma with scholarship dollars behind it. I also spoke to a friend about her application to NYU. She wrote about experiencing homelessness at one point in her life. I asked how she felt as she wrote about that, and she said that it was difficult to write, rather forced, and I had an interesting experience rereading it when I graduated, because I had sort of programmed myself to think of myself as less than, as inferior. Her application described her poverty, living briefly in a shelter, as well as her dad not being present in her life. I asked why she wrote about hardships, and she said, because I had to get into school, and advisors emphasized, like, sell your pain. It was a flex, she said, to go to a prestigious school like NYU, but I didn't feel like I should have been there. She had the grades, she had the credentials, but she lacked self-esteem, partly because she forced herself to write about moments in her life she wasn't proud of. So for the longest time, she felt her NYU acceptance was undeserved. She would stay under the radar in classes instead of making her presence known. Her essay had become an internalized mindset. I spoke to one of my younger brother's teachers, Aaron Jones, who attended Morehouse, and he said, teachers promoted it, the personal statement about hardships. But he wanted to show the admission officers what he was capable of, and decided that if he wrote about his neighborhood in Annapolis, Maryland, it would put me in a box. This box was the cliched story of a black kid in America. Mr. Jones said that if he had wanted to go to a PWI, a predominantly white institution, then a sob story would have been more important. But since he wanted to go to a historically black institution, he could showcase his abilities. He emphasized that students of color have more to offer than the cliché. He said, the sob story can be the truth, but it's not all said all. He argued that college is a gateway to experiencing a fresh start, and that bringing old baggage with you only limits your growth. He ended up writing about a teacher who had mentored him since 5th grade. As I kept rewriting my personal statement, it sounded cliched. It was my authentic experience, but I felt that trauma overwhelmed my drafts. I didn't want to be a victim anymore. I didn't want to promote that narrative. I wanted college to be a new beginning for me. At the time, my mom, a part-time health aide, was taking care of a patient who used a wheelchair. My mom sometimes unable to pick him up at the bus stop as she was just getting off of her second job, so I took on that responsibility. Trauma is one of life's teachers. We are molded by it, and some will choose to write about it urgently, passionately. Yet I would encourage those who feel like their stories were written in tragedy to rethink that, as I did. When you open your mind to all the other things that you can offer in life, it becomes liberating. Let's show college admission officers what they're missing out on, not what they already know. Elijah Meginson is a graduating senior at the Uncommon Charter High School in Crown Heights, Brooklyn, New York, who is still choosing between several colleges for the fall. He wrote this article for the New York Times. So that is the article, and now we're going to go through and answer these questions. I want you to think, what topics did the writer feel pressure to write about? What is the argument the writer is making? Do you agree with his argument? How does the writer feel about his trauma? And what role do images in the media play in how we develop our identities? And then what is the most important line from the article? So I want you to take time to really think about, what is this article talking about? What are the topics? What is the argument that he is making? And then go through and answer these questions. Thank you.